All right, friends, family, loved ones, welcome to the latest episode of The Grand Weaver. We are super excited to have Ryan Skoog from Venture, and we got a lot of questions and things, so we're going to jump right into it. So first of all, Ryan, I'd love for you to share a little bit about who you are, maybe a little bit about the backstory, and then we'll dive into some more details.
Yeah. Oh, man. Thanks for having me here. This is so fun and what an honor. I love the Grand Weaver idea because I've always felt that God he has this amazing plan, but we don't know it. And he just put piece after piece after piece, leaving breadcrumbs and following him. But yeah, my journey has been just a crazy one. It started for me, it is all revolved around the global church. And I grew up in a family where we never went to Disneyland, but we went to refugee camps as a kid. And I encountered the global church, and I got to go to China as I was 18. We were smuggling Bibles into China back when that was actually useful before phones. And I met a guy named Brother Moses, and he had been arrested for his faith. And he was actually beaten 100 days straight, telling him, recant Christianity. And he's like, I can't. Jesus has been so kind to me. And this guy who'd been in prison and all these things, he had more joy than anyone I'd ever met in my life. And I was just hooked. I was like, I want to serve heroes like Brother Moses the rest of my life. Yeah. And so that just lit a fire, and you never know where that leads. I had a guy say, find what wrecks you and feed it, and just see where that thing leads. And so we loved serving the global church. And a friend of mine, and I was right out of college, and he was still in college, came and said, hey, dude, let's bike across the country and raise money for missionaries to help spread the gospel and take care of kids. And I was like, I had no idea you're a cyclist. That's awesome. And he goes, oh, I'm not. And I'm like, dude, do you have a bike? He's like, no. I was like, do you have any money? No. Do you know how to raise money? No. When do you want to go? And he's like, 2 months. And we cobbled this thing together, and I was the boring guy that stayed back to help organize, and he and some buddies did it. We accomplished it, and it raised like $16,000, and we were like, wow, it could have been like $1 million to us,
How old were you at that time?
Let's see, I was like 22.
22?
So,
okay, yeah, early 20s.
Yeah. And and then what happened was we stumbled upon something beautiful. Like, if you physically sacrifice for others, that's what Jesus did for us. He literally put his physical body sacrificing for us. Mm-hmm. And there's something beautiful about that. The word compassion means co-suffering, and is in the etymology of it. And that's what Jesus did. He came and co-suffered with us on this world. And so that kind of translated into, there's a guy named Don Miller who wrote this book, Blue Like Jazz. He went on one of our tours and wrote about it in his next book, and that became a New York Times bestseller, and things just started taking off. And meanwhile, I was part of an entrepreneurial family, and my dad started a travel-based company. My brother started one, and then I started one, and you just kind of had to start a company to show up at the dinner table. That's how things worked at our house, and and by God's grace, we took the companies and we started funding the admin of Venture, so that when people gave, 100% of it could go straight to the programs and projects, and it really started dialing into that. Who are the Brother Moseses of this world, if you will, in the difficult areas? And so we for adventure, the word means go to a difficult or dangerous place. And so we go to the really, really tough places. And when I say that, if we call it the 3 uns. So it's unsafe, unreached, and unresourced. And so unsafe, it's war zones, it's high trafficking, like villages where 80% of the kids were being trafficked, or oppressed areas, or persecution. And, we've had, in the past 2 years, we've had 51 of our partners arrested, and 5 have given their lives. They've been killed for the gospel. And so when I say unsafe, it's like the really tough places. Yeah. And yet they're also unreached. And that's kind of a thing that matches up, is when you go to tough places, there's very little gospel witness. There's that's kind of the reason. Yeah. And then the last is we go to unresourced. So we only go to places where less than 1% of Christian giving goes. So if it's really bad, they've never heard Jesus, and like no one's giving, let's go there. And that's the Jesus way. He said, find the least, right? Yeah. And so I am excited to let you know that the kingdom of God is absolutely breaking out in the tough places. Yeah. Like unbelievable things. Like I think I told you this, but I went through like our emails from all these different countries that things are working in. We'll get emails of all these miracle reports, and I started mapping them out to the book of Acts. And I can go through every chapter in the book of Acts, and I can give you a story of our partners that's just like one of those miracles in the chapters of the book of Acts.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. So it's been our honor. And so by the Lord, His grace and favor, the companies have grown and Venture's grown together in tandem. And that, $16,000 that we were so excited about kind of turned into about $65 million. And we've seen tens of, 15,000 house churches started in 10 different countries, and 75 million meals brought to war refugees, and over 3,000 girls have been rescued from trafficking, and tens of thousands have been trained. And we go to places that are so unreached that like they're still worshiping rocks and trees and sacrificing animals to rocks and trees.
Wow.
And or like if a woman has their period, they think that they're cursed by the gods. And they'll kick the woman out of the village when they're having their period, because they think if a woman having her period looks at a guy in the eyes, they'll make him sterile. And just weird, remote places.
Yeah, in 2025.
Oh, yeah.
So you're highlighting martyrs happening today.
Oh, yeah.
You're highlighting the worship of things that is probably beyond our comprehension in 2025. And that's fascinating.
Yeah, rumors where a woman just simply having their period, they think she's cursed, and yet you come in with the gospel that God actually created you, He made you, He loved you, He saves us, and that you were not meant to be oppressed, you were not meant to be abused, you were not meant to be trafficked, because the story they believe is you screwed up in your last life, karma sent you this life as a low caste person. And so you deserve to be abused. You deserve to be punished. You deserve to be trafficked. And if you don't take it, then your next life won't be better. And that's the core story, the core belief. And you come in with the gospel that says, no, God loves you. He made you. Everyone's the same. He loves everyone equally. And they're like, could that ever be true? And you're like, it's the truest thing there ever was, is that there is God doesn't love one group more than another, or one race more than another, or one gender more than another. And so it's just beautiful seeing the gospel take root in these places.
That's phenomenal. Okay, so I'm just going to jump back for a second here.
Yeah.
So when you did the biking thing, was that the start of Venture itself? So that was actually forming Venture. And then
I joke that it was a club. It was just like a club. I was like serving in our church, and my buddy Aaron was still in college, and so we just kept doing it because it was just an awesome experience for us and for others. And I tell people who want to like start a nonprofit, I'm like, just start a club, just start doing it first, and on the side, and get volunteers and move that way, and let it pull you into an organization in that regard.
Yeah. And so did you start that before you ever started a business, or did you start?
So I was getting I was in between college and getting my MBA when Venture started, and then I got my MBA and took a marketing paper, and got some investors, and we emptied out our retirement savings and went for it. And just the normal entrepreneurial story.
So. Absolutely. Well, the thing that maybe isn't normal about the entrepreneurial story, I'm thinking about even my own journey, was I wasn't particularly mission-minded when I stepped into starting a business. And so for me, it was, well, you start a company so that you can make money and have the easy life. That was really, even though I came out of a Christian university and I was trying to have a biblical worldview, I would say that really was not part of my story for a while. And so what's fascinating to me about yours is you started actually the mission first and the organization second. So maybe if you want to speak to how that might have informed you. And
I kind of wanted to be a missionary in China, not necessarily a business leader. And yet I felt a call from God into business and thought, okay, well, this could be a tool. Like the business could really fund the ministry side. And, in the early days of getting anything started, it's really difficult. You kind of need a patron of sorts to help any kind of nonprofit really grab a hold and take some root. And so we thought, well, maybe a business could be that patron in that regard. And I know it's super risky now when I talk about it, but back then, you're late 20s, you're just like, let's go. And so it was
it's beautiful when you don't know any better, right?
Yeah. We're too dumb to know. And so, there's this whole idea of where God never asked anyone to do anything easy in the whole scripture. It was always impossible, and it was always an adventure. Mm-hmm. He's like, Moses, I want you to free millions of slaves. Here's a stick. Like that's our God. That's what he does. He's like, I'm going to invite you on an adventure. It's going to be absolutely impossible, but if you stick with me, we're going to see some things happen. And David, here, I want you to destroy these oppressing army and this giant. Here's a little rock. And for us, like our stick or our rock was a bike, here, use this bike and see if we can't push back the darkness in really tough places. And that just seems like the hallmark of God.
Yeah. And could you ever have imagined the bike rides leading to what it is today?
No, not at all. That's the best part is that, I always say following God is like breadcrumbs. You don't know where it's going, but you do know who left it. And so there's these little breadcrumbs that God would leave for us that we knew it was him, but we didn't know where it was going. And I think that's kind of on purpose, because God's like, we're going to go on an adventure. And you're like, where? He said, you don't need to know, but you need to know me. Yeah. So let's just do it together. And that's the beauty of following God. And it's not without heartache and unbelievable difficulties and stressful nights and getting used to the smell of your carpet as you lay on your face praying before God. Like that's all in there. I don't want to make it sound like it's been a breeze by any means, but
for sure.
But what adventure is a breeze,
Right.
And so what impossible adventure is a breeze?
Yeah. Okay. So you start this venture ministry by bike riding, you move into launching a business, you've got family businesses, all those things. Maybe like advance the story a little bit for us. Like how did it, what was the next step in that as it evolved into what it is today?
Yeah. I don't think anyone's asked that, like middle grounds. They always want to know the beginning and the end, the difficult middle, the valley and all of that. But no, so we eventually, my brother and I, and my dad had been out of his business for quite some time. My brother and I took our businesses and put them together and along with my dad's. And so we run those together basically as one. And by and large, what we would do is we're doing tough things here. And growing up with my parents and everything, we would go to tough places already as kids, the refugee camps and difficult countries. And so it was like, wait a minute, if we're getting people to do tough things, let's go to the tough places and really dive into who is out there serving in the tough places. And we met incredible heroes like Rosabelle, who's been serving. Let me just paint this picture of Rosabelle, one of our partners. Mm-hmm. She grew up in a war zone in Myanmar. Her home was bombed 7 times, her bamboo home. And so everything she owned was in a cardboard box. And her mom told her, hey, you have to go get your box, get your things. We have to flee. The army's coming. And that happened 7 different times. One time, the planes were dropping bombs on defenseless bamboo villages. And so she ran into like this little kind of pit to try and get cover. And outside of her were bombs, and right out in front of her in this pit was a cobra. And she goes, Lord, you shut the mouth of the lions with Daniel. Will you stop this cobra from biting me? Because I can't go up. There's bombs on top, or above. Mm-hmm. And she watched the cobra just coil up and fall asleep right in front of her for 2 hours. And then she got to safety. So that's Rosabelle. And she started taking in her first war refugee orphan, a little baby at 16. And now we partner with her to serve over 5,000 refugee orphans every single day. And she has been doing that for 35 years and just planted all these churches. In fact, just a couple months ago, they wanted to do Christmas outreaches all over Myanmar, and they couldn't have any crowd. You can't have any public gathering. There's no right to assembly or anything. And so they started meeting in caves, and we have pictures of caves where hundreds of people were meeting in caves all up and down this area in this war area. And thousands of people responded to receive Jesus in caves. And that's just the kind of person Rosabelle is. It's just awesome. And so you find people like Rosabelle's, and we have all kinds of partners in 10 different countries that are like Rosabelle's, that we could say, hey, we want to come alongside and serve you in any way, shape, or form, and help you with the model, and help you with some development, and help you with some, funding, and all these things, and just grow together. And so I just feel like the kingdom of God works best when it grows through friendship. And so that's kind of how it's just friendship started growing with these partners who are heroes like the Moseses and the Rosabelles. And I can go on the list. I can go on and on. And then as we needed more funds, there would just be more people would jump on board, or God would bless the companies, all the way up until COVID. And that's when we took a radical shift in our business model for everything.
Yeah. Do you spend some time on smelling the carpet during COVID time?
Yeah, that's where I came up with the phrase, actually, was that the 2020 was the year that I got used to the smell of my carpet. If you don't mind me sharing a little bit of that story.
Oh, please do. Absolutely.
But, things were, growing and exciting, and miracles are happening, and we're, tabulating our own, book of Acts from all of our partners and the stories that are happening. And things are great on our company. It was our third year of like 30% up year over year. And then, COVID hit, and we went from selling like 1,500 tickets a day to 0 in 3 weeks. And then it got way worse, because then we started having to refund 6 months worth of tickets. And so think of like Target with nothing on the shelves and a line way out the block on the refund desk. And so we had something called negative revenue. You don't learn that in your MBA programs, where you're refunding more than you're selling.
Yeah.
And so we're losing money out of our revenue line and our expense line. And it was just brutal. And no one wanted to give a loan to a company during COVID that was in travel or anything like that. And so, and then it got worse. My daughter started having nightmares every single night. And they're related to our programs in Nepal. We rescue girls from trafficking. We work with all of our partners to do that, and all over Nepal. And she's met these girls and prayed for these girls. And she started having these nightmares related to these girls. They're just, the only way I can say it is demonic. Like, she'd wake up puking. They were so gross and graphic. And she would wake up crying like, Daddy, make these nightmares stop. And I'm like, oh my gosh. This on top of, all the stress of the company and losing all of our life savings and all of our retirement savings and everything. And so it showed up basically it was a Monday. We didn't have payroll for Friday. And I was like, this is it. Kind of losing everything. And, just went out and prayed because I had nothing else to do. There's nothing else I could do. And just cried more than I ever cried in my adult life. And just saying, Jesus, I need you. And that's when I had probably one of the greatest experiences with God I've ever had in my whole life. And I closed my eyes and I had this picture of Jesus, and he was crying. And I heard a voice just say, Ryan, you've never cried alone. Every time you've cried, I've cried with you. And then it was like, I was crying not at my bad situation. I was crying at how loving Jesus was.
Yeah.
I was so overwhelmed with the love of Jesus. And it was like, I could see him for just a flash of a moment. It felt like I could see everyone in the world, that Jesus was always crying, and no one has ever cried alone. And that's the infinite love of Jesus, like how high and wide and long and deep and all of that. And oh man, it was beautiful. And we had this prayer time that night and took communion. And my daughter, for the first time in 3 months, didn't have a nightmare. And it's just beautiful. And then the next night we took communion and no nightmares. And I was like, kids, we're Catholic. And we just started taking communion every night. And we found out that, I bought the Amazon, the big 500, church bulk.
Oh, communion. You were the one. It made it hard for us to get ours. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I found out you shouldn't, it's just pro tip. You shouldn't buy the 500, because by the time you get to the end of the 500, you are Catholic. It's turned into real wine.
Fermented,
Yeah. So buy them at 100 boxes at a time is a little easier. But so then we ended up getting a rescue capital and loan, and 2023 ended up being our best year in company history. And like the Lord just rescued us out of that. And here's the crazy thing, like not only did the company just tank, but since the companies were funding all of the admin of Venture, that meant that Venture's admin funding went, from nice and flush to nothing in 3 weeks. Yeah. And so I was like, God, we're going to lose the company and this dream that we've worked our whole lives to build. And people just came out of the woodwork, and I never had to ask anyone. People just called me and saying, hey, I know you guys normally cover the admin. God woke us up and told us to give you $250,000. And another person over text, hey, God just spoke to me to give you $160,000 to your admin. And like, who wants to give to admin? It's just crazy. And,
that's not normal.
And so the Lord took care of that. And it was this humbling experience where, God was like, you thought this was yours? This is mine.
Yeah.
I'm running this thing. I'm taking care of it because it's mine. And so just realizing that moment was like a surrender time of like, okay, I really am just along for the ride. Like it's your thing.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's interesting. Like as I step back and reflect on the timeline that you lay out here.
Yeah,
faithful, all kinds of incredible ministry happening, and then the dip. It's not like, I was. And so I think it's so tempting for us to tell stories to ourselves, and the enemy loves to tell us stories, right?
Yeah.
Let's here. Let me help with the narrative.
Yeah,
this stuff all crashed, even though we were trying to be faithful, and all this great ministry was happening. That doesn't put a bubble around us, right, and protect things, because the Lord still wants to teach us new things. And so I love that you kind of gave that perspective of God taught you, and Jesus met you in a place that you couldn't have been met in any other circumstance.
Yeah,
right? And that's just.
I love. Okay, so the pattern that I see in Scripture, since we're talking about these patterns of it's always an adventure and it's always impossible and all of this. The other pattern is it seems like God puts all of his leaders, the big biblical heroes, through two schools. There's like the school of leadership, and then there's like the school of the heart. And, take Moses. Mm-hmm. He's under Pharaoh, and he's learning leadership and the largest empire in the world. He's like the number 2 or whatever, in the largest empire in the world. And then God takes him to the wilderness to have the school of the heart. And then David, he learns under Saul how to run a kingdom. And then God takes him out into the desert to learn the school of the heart. And Joseph, he's under Potiphar, and he's, super influential, and he's learning all this leadership. It's going great. And then it feels like there's this cheap shot, and he has to go to prison, and it's the school of the heart. And so I feel like God kind of leads all of his leaders in the school of leadership, and then he takes them through the school of the heart. And there's only things you can learn through defeat and loss and pain and tragedy. Like that's the school of the heart. Yeah. And I think it just seems like a biblical pattern. And so a lot of times we want to avoid the school of the heart because we're like, we're Americans, man, we're blessed, and we're going to just be #blessed. And I used to think that, and during the COVID thing, sorry if I'm just ranting here.
This is a great perspective. So keep going.
But yeah, because COVID was protracted, so there's multiple times where I felt like I was in the pit of despair. And one of the prayer retreats, I just took a day to go pray. And at the very beginning of 2020, I wrote in my journal that I felt like the word for the year was going to be blessed. And for sure, January and February, we were up 30% again, 4th year in a row. And I was like, wow, what a year of blessing. And then COVID hits. And I'm like, this doesn't feel like blessing.
Yeah.
Like what? This doesn't feel like #blessed or any kind of blessed. And so I'm, on my walk, and I'm like, God, I really thought you said this is a year of blessing. And it was like, I felt like, it was the only time I ever had this experience where I felt like the Holy Spirit was just reading the Bible to me. And just right in my heart, I hear, blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit. Blessed are those who are meek and humble. Blessed are those who are hungry and thirsty. And the Lord's like, I did bless you. And I was like, oh man, I don't I don't want the Jesus blessing. I want like the Deuteronomy 28, blessed in the city and the field, and blessed when you come and go, and Numbers.
Yeah,
God's
read that
face
one to
shining. Me. Yeah, can you read that one to me? And really, I think the school of the heart is when you realize that there's good and then there's good. And what I mean by that is there's good where it's like, oh, things are going good. Or there's good like the cross was good. The suffering of Christ was good. And then there's like blessed, and then there's blessed. There's blessed in the city and the field, and then there's blessed are those who are mourning. Blessed are those who are meek. And I think God just kind of rounds out your definition of words like good and blessed in the school of the heart.
Yeah.
And not that I'm done. I'm probably going to have a heck of more, coming.
Yeah.
So it's just but each round, each cycle, Jesus becomes sweeter. And
a couple other things jump out to me around your story. You highlight that at 2020, very difficult year, and not until 2023 did you see, like from the world's perspective, blessing, but provision, but having to trust God the whole way. The other thing that jumps out to me, and I see this in my own family, is sometimes the enemy goes after our family, right?
Yeah.
And as part of one of his tools and his schemes.
That's so true.
Even if we're locked in and we're abiding, he comes after our kids and our spouses and that type of thing. And so maybe you speak to that a little bit.
Man, I don't think I'll ever understand this one, but so many of the people that I see, just walking with God in deep ways, it seems like the enemy kind of goes after kids and takes a cheap shot, and I don't know why or how, but I'd see that pattern, and all I know is to get on my face before God, and like for my daughter, night after night, I just lay out in front of her door, praying, God save my daughter, God save my daughter. And she is, she's so bright and full of the life and the love of Christ. Like, it's a beautiful thing. And there's a depth to her that she never would have had had she not walked through that.
Understood.
And so it's almost to the point where you can thank God for those times. There's the Psalms. I think, I don't know if I shared this with you, but the Psalms changes from third person to first person in Psalm 23. A lot of times, Psalms does it a lot of times, but in Psalm 23 it does it, where it starts out like, the Lord is my shepherd, and he makes me lie down in green pastures, and he brings me to still waters. And then eventually it switches to you, like your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table. And so that switch from like the Lord to you, it happens in the valley of the shadow of death. And it says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not be afraid because you are with me. And I feel like, in that COVID time, God went from like the Lord to like, no, Jesus, you were with me. And that's a beautiful thing. And that happened in my daughter as well. And so I kind of go from like, instead of the why God, I'm trying to learn how to say like, what are you trying to teach us in this moment? What are we trying to learn in this moment?
Yeah.
So
I can really resonate with that, because I saw a lot of in that same time frame, a lot of just really intentionally praying over my kids, like out loud against the enemy, pleading the blood of Jesus on my home and those types of things, because you could see very, very clearly that the enemy was going after my kids. And absolutely not. By the power of Jesus, absolutely not. We're pleading the blood. And so I just really resonate with that in you and stepping through that. And I love the school of the heart, because what I'm learning more and more, because coming through business and you learn all the leadership and all of those types of things, that's all great. But if it's not
necessary,
but if it's not anointed, right? Like that's really where I'm at right now is, okay, and the only way it's anointed is by abiding, by actually being in relationship with the God of the universe and walking with Jesus and saying, Lord, give me eyes to see and ears to hear what it is that you're doing in our midst, because I can have all of my business leadership and training and all of those things and equipping. And if I'm just going to apply that to what God's trying to do to advance his kingdom here, it doesn't work very well. Right? Because it's me.
So true.
And I got to get myself out of the way. So I feel like that's the lesson he's been teaching me over and over again the last few years. And
that's awesome.
And just trying to lean into that whole to that whole thing. So,
Yeah. No, it's so good you say that, because it's, Jesus said that it's out of our abiding in friendship with him that will bear fruit. And so we can do all we want from, it's great to grow in wisdom and stature and favor with God and favor with man, just like Jesus did. Like, that's necessary. But the fruit still comes out of the relationship with God and what he does in our hearts during the school of the heart.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And the other thing that I've been learning on the fruit side of things, last year was a difficult year for me. I'd actually say it was the hardest one in my life. And I was reflecting on that. And and I'd say hard, but I still was tremendously blessed through that year. There was just a lot of hard things. And as I was reflecting on that, really around fruit, the idea that we're to abide and that the pruning happens, even if you're bearing fruit, the pruning happens so that you can bear much fruit. Yeah. And that was the thing that kind of opened up for me is, hey, it's painful and it's hard, but this pruning is necessary. If I'm praying, Lord, I want to bear much fruit, well, then he's going to have to do some pruning, and I'm probably not going to like it.
Yeah, of course not.
but I'm going to trust. But ultimately, I'm going to trust, Lord, that what you have for me on the other side of this is bearing much fruit. And probably not in the way I imagined it. That's why I love all the way back to the beginning of your story. Is like you start out on some bike rides. You're probably not imagining exactly how this is going to unfold many, many years later, right?
Yeah, no. I mean, it's like we have some big celebrations this year of crossing all of these churches being planted and communities being transformed, and we had the record. Our partner Durga has the record for the highest altitude Jesus film showing in history, 19,000 feet up in the Himalayas, and seeing pictures of people on the top of the world hearing about Christ, and just awesome things. And I always sit back and go, Lord, this we had no idea that first bike ride that this guy in the Himalayas would hear about Christ because of some college kids and a bike. But that's the kingdom, that's the kingdom. It's God takes a stick and a pebble and, these really random things. And he's like, yeah, that's all I need. Just put it in my hands. Yeah.
I always love the stories that are like, but God.
Yes.
Here's all the stuff.
I just read that this morning.
But God. Yeah. It's like, absolutely.
I just read that this morning, Ephesians 2. It's like, as for you, you were dead. You were gone. You were an enemy. You were just... It was bad, but God, he raised you up. It's so good, and that's two of my favorite words in the whole Bible.
Yeah. So I'd love for you to maybe tie in as you've been on this journey and abiding in things. There's definitely a part of your story that has led to you even writing a book about prayer. I would love for you to share a little bit about what God taught you through this time leading up even to writing a book on prayer and just kind of unpack that a little bit.
For sure. Yeah. So it started with a bigger question. And I think, this is something I probably should have said earlier, but the kingdom of God is absolutely exploding in the global church. Right now, missiologists in the Gordon Conwell Center for Global Christianity, the historians are saying we're not seeing something that's like the greatest growth of Christianity in our lifetime. We're seeing something that's like the greatest growth of Christianity ever in the history of the church. And that's what we're living through right now. It's just exploding. There's thousands of church planting movements that are multiplying. Churches that are planting churches. And we're seeing that in many of the different countries that we serve, where it's like 6th and 7th generation churches in just a few years, whole villages coming to Christ and miracles happening. And like half of a whole people group have come to Christ. It's just incredible. And we started asking it seems like there's like a bit of a decline feeling in the church in the West. So what if the church in the West were to sit at the feet of the global church and say, could you teach us how to follow Jesus? And so we started asking, can you teach us to follow Jesus? What is the leadership principle that is driving all of this incredible growth around the world? And instead of finding a leadership principle, what was really undergirding it was a prayer life. And I was just genuine. You're like, okay, you pray. Oh, you really pray. And, you really pray. Like Roosevelt, I asked her about her prayer life. And she's like, oh, well, when I was 18, I had no money and I wanted to tithe. And so I figured the only currency I had was my time. So I decided to start praying 2.5 hours a day. And I've been doing that the past 35 years. I was like, so when you say pray and we say pray, we're talking about different things.
Yeah.
And so
I got 45 seconds.
Yeah. And so I came back and I had a shelf full of leadership books on how leaders lead and not a single one on how leaders pray. And there's a reason for it too. There's a big foundation. I can't say the name of it, but they did a 6-figure study on the prayer habits of Christian leaders, not just Christians, but Christian leaders. And the results of the study were so dismal that they never published the study. And the guy who paid for it said, this is one of the most disappointing things I've ever seen.
Wow.
And one of the things they found was that the more education, the more leadership experience, the more training, the less we prayed, not the more we prayed. And Jesus was the opposite. Like the more the crowds grew, it said, the more often it said he withdrew to solitary places to pray. And it's almost as if we're like busier than Jesus, as my friend Peter said. And so, and it's like, well, how do you get busier than Jesus? Well, we figured out a way in America.
Yeah, we're really good at it.
We're awesome at it. And so then what happened? So I thought, well, what if we go on a journey sitting at the feet of great leaders who are praying leaders and just say, what's your prayer life? Like, tell us your day. And we did it between myself and Peter Greer and Cam Doolittle. We did over 100 hours of interviews with leaders in 6 different continents, and Roosevelt's in the in the refugee camps, and people out in the Himalayas, and then also New York financiers and Christian billionaires, and then Francis Chan and John Mark Comer and Johnny Erickson Tata, Tim Mackey, these folks, and just said, tell us your prayer habits. And it was one of the greatest journeys in my whole life, like just one of the best things ever, being able to sit at the feet of all these leaders around the world. And what we've discovered was, I thought their prayer lives were going to be just all over the map, just totally different. And instead, and this blew us away, their prayer lives were almost the same all across the world, all across business and church ministry and nonprofit ministry and different countries. And it seems as if any leader that wanted to have an intentional prayer life, the Holy Spirit would lead them to similar prayer habits. And so that's the book, Lead with Prayer. All of the chapters are these similar prayer habits that we found that were just ubiquitous across the world. And even across time, we looked into Jesus' habits and the saints, and it seems like this is a theme. And it's just awesome. And so what the book is all these case studies and stories of these praying leaders and what they do, and then tools to help you start modeling their prayer life and become a prayer enthusiast in your own life. And I say this as a prayer enthusiast, not an expert in prayer, because
yeah, for sure.
I mean, how do you write a book in prayer and say I'm an expert, or it's like writing a book in humility, like, oh, yeah, I'm an expert in humility, like, oh, really? Like, no, but you can be an enthusiast. Like, we can all be an enthusiast, and so that's what I want to do, is be an enthusiast and model these prayer habits of these leaders, and that's what the book helps you do. And we also have like free downloads at leadwithprayer.com. You can just download all the habits, and we have prayer cards and a deck of prayer cards that you can like learn and use their habits, and walk through the day and craft a day with God, the way that these leaders do.
Yeah, and it's so important, because I can tell you, even though I shared with you earlier that last year, 2024, was the hardest year of my life, the most significant part of that is I knew that it was going to be a hard year, and I protected my quiet time and my time with the Lord, and that when I look back, while I concluded that it was a hard year, I'm also really, really thankful that God continued to meet with me, speak over me, pour into me, surround me with loving people.
Yeah.
And I think the key to it was my relationship with God through prayer. And I was very thankful for that part of the journey, because otherwise I would have relied on me. And as you're talking about all the leaders with more education, I think we become more self-reliant, and we trust in ourselves.
Yes.
And I cannot trust in myself. Like, I have to trust in the Lord. And it seems so obvious when we say it, but how we actually live most of the time when we're not abiding. And so I'm just really thankful that I'm starting to understand more. And I would say I'm becoming an abiding enthusiast, to the point where I do not feel like boy, I need to spend time with the Lord this morning. It's like, man, can I carve out more time? Can I extend this time? Should I get up a little earlier? Can I, because I know we're not done here.
Yeah.
And that's
so
just
good.
been so life-giving to me. Like in a way that I didn't imagine. I'm always been good at business, good at process, like all these things. And it's like, none of that stuff matters really anymore. Like they're all just schemes that, I mean, it's good to have training in those types of things. God's equipped me in ways,
great tools in God's hands.
But in my hands, I don't even, there are times when I've discovered in the last few years, back to the prayer I pray now is, Lord, give me eyes to see and ears to hear what you're doing. Because oftentimes I would find when I thought I was being helpful, I was actually disrupting what he was trying to do.
It's that Moses story where at some point God must have opened his heart to know that he was supposed to rescue the Jews from slavery. And so he runs out and he kills an Egyptian. And God's like, well, I mean, you're going to rescue them, but this isn't how you're going to do it. And we have a totally different way we're going to do this here. And I think I've done the Moses run out and, make this thing happen. That's really gotten myself into a lot of trouble. So, that's so good.
Man, this has been just such an enjoyable conversation. I love your heart. I love just the stories of what's happening in the global church. The idea that we here in the U.S., I've heard more and more lately about other people in other countries saying, "Hey, maybe we should send some missionaries to the U.S.," which is probably a shocking idea for many of us here who are thinking about sending people that direction. But you kind of see it. So.
Oh man, we just have so much to learn. We have so much to learn from folks who have been persecuted for their faith. We have so much to learn. One of our dear brothers, he was just beaten up for his faith 3 months ago, and they ripped the cross off of his necklace and kicked him on the ground and said, "Get out of here! Quit converting people to Jesus." And the police came and kind of, in this country, there's not like, the victim and the criminal don't get in different rooms. They put him in the same room. And he looked at him and just said, I want to let you know I forgive you guys. Because that's what Jesus did for me. And I was like, how did you do that? And same thing. He said, you spend enough time with Jesus, it becomes easy because he rubs off on you. And what you talked about abiding, that actually was the biggest discovery of the whole book for me, learning from these leaders. Was that I thought they were just going to be these heroes at calling down heaven on earth in their prayers. And for sure they did that. But the foundation of their prayer lives was friendship first. Mm-hmm. It was a friendship. They'd go take a walk with God. Roosevelt take a walk in a war zone with Jesus, her friend. And Francis Chan said, I got this international ministry, all these pressures. I have to just go take a walk with my friend Jesus. And another New York financier is over billions of dollars in capital, downtown Manhattan. And he puts these huge blocks of time in his schedule during the day that says, waste time with God. And I was like, why do you say that? And he says, everyone,
so good.
Everyone thinks it's a waste of time to spend that much time with God, in my profession. He says, but I put it there for a different reason. I put it there because that's what friends do. They waste time with each other. They just have time with no agenda being with each other. And it just blew my mind. And so I started just taking a walk with Jesus and talking to him, not having agenda, and just letting things come out of my heart and listening. And it's just a totally different way to pray. That's the abiding. And Jesus said, I don't longer call you servants. You're my friends now. Yeah. And out of this friendship, this fruit is going to come. It's just beautiful.
It's so interesting because one of the things we were reflecting on this, a group of guys were gathering and we were talking about our quiet times. And many of us as business leaders have this hard time switching the, hey, here's the things I need to accomplish. Like, what does a successful quiet time look like? And I was sharing this perspective that God was kind of unpacking for me as a dad. I was having a conversation with my son, and he was complaining about some of my parenting techniques or styles or things. And I'm like, you know what? I probably got a lot of things wrong, but I will tell you this. The one thing that I can say that I did was I was always present. The only thing that I knew to do for sure was to be present. And I don't think that you can say that I wasn't. And God kind of turned that around on me a little bit and said, look, I don't need you to come offer the perfect prayers or have the perfect devotional time or Bible study. Eric, I just want you to be present with me.
Yeah.
Just show up and be present.
So good.
And it's so simple, but it's so hard. like just to be present and not to feel like I got to read all the way through this psalm and this commentary and write this thing. And so a good friend of mine just encouraged me, just hey, when you come into God's presence, be gracious with yourself too. Like, don't feel like, boy, I missed it yesterday, or I didn't do, we have this. Yeah. For some reason, we bring all these ideas around like what defines a good quiet time or these types of things. And God's like, I just want you. Don't worry about the rest of this stuff. Yeah. And that's really what I think freed me up as I'm sharing the past few years. That's really opened up for me. Yeah. And it's just because I lightened up about the whole thing. I was like, wait, I just got to show up. Yep. Yeah. And it's clunky and it's awkward at first. And now it's like, oh, okay, now, it's conversational. And I understand what this abiding thing looks like a little bit more. And I'm hungry for, as you're saying it, I'm an enthusiast. I by no means feel like I have it figured out, but I love that it's switched from an obligation to a desire, a true desire of my heart to show up and be with my friend. Like you're saying, like wasting time. I love that. That's a great illustration of it.
Oh, it's so good. And the other major change for me is that I went from having a quiet time to crafting a day with God. Like, what does a day with God look like? Morning habits. Dallas Willard and John Mark Comer would wake up and John Ortberg, and they'd want the first thing out of their lips to be a psalm. And then I started taking the habit of just rolling out of my bed onto my knees every day and just starting my morning that way. And then I'd take a walk with Jesus. And then what are like throughout the day, ways to stop. And I have these prayer cards where I'll just stop and just remember, God, help me not miss the fact that you're here with me right now. And just, like almost like church bells that used to ring, every hour. The reason they did that was so that people would stop and remember Christ and stop and remember God's presence and stop and worship. And so trying to put metaphorical church bells in the day. And then what are your evening habits? Ours is communion as a family and reflection and some worship and, some time of intercession of praying for those that you met throughout the day or you were with throughout the day. And just what does it look like to craft a day with God instead of just to have, I did my workout, did my quiet time, did my this, did my reading, and then move, and it's like prayer time is not something you accomplish. It's crafting a day with God. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it helps, like I get this little piano behind me. It helps when my little 15-year-old sits down and starts singing her heart out in an evening. It pretty much invites you into to moments and the little church bells ringing, which I'm beautiful. Just thankful. That's kind of one of the things in our home. It's music, and God has given us the gift of that to remind us of His promises and what He says about us and those types of things. So that's really what a day looks like in our home. It's pretty funny when people come over. They're like, "Is your house ever quiet?" No, it isn't. But it's noisy in the best way.
Yes, I like that. Noisy in the best way.
Yeah, so good. Well, Ryan, I thank you so much for your time today. Any concluding thoughts you want to share with people just as we're kind of wrapping up our time together? Anything that's just on your heart? Can be anything, really, that you'd love to leave people with that are maybe listening to this podcast.
Yeah, there's the idea of like this rhythm of being able to spend a lot of time with God, and then He whispers something impossible in your ear, and then you step out in that impossible, and then miracles start happening. And then it's a fight, and so you go back to the presence of God, and then He strengthens you, and then He whispers something else in your ear, and then like that pattern has been one of the most beautiful patterns of my life. You talk about the Grand Weaver, and it's this idea of like lots of prayer, and then some moments of stepping out in courage, and lots of prayer and moments of stepping out in courage, and it feels like that pattern has been so redemptive and beautiful and exciting and miraculous. And I didn't want to follow God because I thought He was going to be boring and up until high school. And literally a few years after totally committing my life to God, I was in the middle of China getting arrested for smuggling Bibles, and I was like, and I thought my life would be boring. It's the greatest stinking adventure you could ever imagine. But that adventure starts with the abiding, extended prayer, listening to the whisper, and then taking a step, and then something happens. and you find out that you didn't step on water, you stepped on dry ground somehow. And I just want to encourage people to, like, that's the invitation of Scripture. That's the invitation of Christ. And don't miss it. I just don't want to be silent. And like, we're living through one of the greatest moves of God ever in history. And if we go to heaven, it's going to be like David and Moses, and these guys are going to be like, what was it like to live through one of the greatest moves of God in the history of the world? I don't want to be silent and be like, oh, I missed it.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be a part of it.
Yeah, that is so good. And invite others to be part of it. That's what's beautiful. I love your heart in that. And that's why I think God prompted me to start this Grand Weaver podcast.
I love it. Yeah.
We've convinced ourselves, or we just hear all the stories in the world that it's all negative and it's all bad and God isn't living and active in his creation. Here you've said in this whole episode, God is doing an incredible work.
Absolutely.
Beyond the scale we've ever experienced in the history of the world right now. And don't miss it. No, so if anyone wants to join in multiple ways, you can still do crazy run, hike, bike things at venture.org. You can be a part of it. We have all kinds of ways to join in prayer, and we're trying to teach people what we're learning from the global church, and I just want to be that conduit, that bridge between what God's doing all over the world and here. So good. I appreciate your time today, man. As always, it's great to have a conversation with you, and we're trusting that whoever's listening to this will be encouraged, and we will be able to bear much fruit.
Yeah, for sure. It can't not, when you start talking about Jesus.
All right. Blessings, my friend.
You too, brother.